Thanks for staying with us. The TASS news agency is reporting that Russia is evacuating diplomatic staff from all its premises in Ukraine. The United States and its allies are stepping up sanctions against Russia over the deployment of troops in separatist regions of eastern Ukraine. At the same time, Ukraine has urged its citizens to immediately leave Russia in the face of what it calls an intensification of aggression by Moscow. Ukrainian authorities say the country is imposing a state of emergency across the country, except for Donetsk and Luhansk, where it has been in place since 2014. The 30-day emergency could be extended for another 30 days. Now, pro-Russian separatists have controlled parts of the two regions since 2014. Russia recognizes them as independent states and approved use of its troops abroad this week. Let's stay with the story and cross live to SABC News correspondent Rosie Burchard, who is joining us from Brussels. Rosie, one of the things that we are seeing is, of course, these developments that are now coming out from Ukraine, suggesting that, in fact, the agency that Russia is now evacuating some of its diplomatic staff from Ukraine. I wonder what is the very latest from Brussels, where you are.
Well, the very latest has just come out, and that is that the EU has slapped sanctions in response to this move from Russia. And those we knew yesterday that the EU was planning sanctions, that it planned to cut trade with these breakaway regions, that it planned to limit the Russian government's capacity to raise capital in EU markets. And it said also that it would be targeting individuals, but we did not know until now who those individuals would be or how far those sanctions would go. But the news is out. The EU will be sanctioning no fewer than 351 members of the Russian parliament and 27 people and entities that it describes as high profile, and we understand those include members of the Russian government and senior military figures. So quite big news from Brussels tonight. It must be said, in the past the EU has been criticised on its foreign policy. Sometimes it's been accused of being slow or ineffective, and that's mainly because in order to approve sanctions you need 27 governments around one table to agree to one position. Here it seems the EU has been quicker and more decisive, but not quick or decisive enough for Ukraine. It seems Kiev is calling for more sanctions on Moscow now.
And how has this news been received?
Well, we haven't heard specific reaction from Russia yet on these EU sanctions, but we have heard Russia's response to Western sanctions more broadly. Russia says these sanctions are just designed to hurt its economy and that it won't lessen its resolve when it comes to trying to move forward and protect the rights of what it says are its people. So it certainly seems that Russia seems undeterred, and that it said that it's proved in the past that it can resist sanctions. Now, of course, it must be said, no sanctions come without pain, and that's particularly relevant here in the European Union, where for a long time there's been a sense of Europe being dependent on Russia when it comes to energy supplies, particularly gas, and that was really in the spotlight on Tuesday when Berlin announced it was freezing certification of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. So that is that controversial pipeline built to funnel gas from Russia into Germany. That is now on ice, but that of course raises questions about Europe's energy security. And we know the EU is in talks with several countries around the world to try and shore up its energy supplies so it can be more resilient if Russia comes with counter sanctions. One of the countries the EU is in talks with is in fact Nigeria.
And one of the things that we saw the European Council saying in a statement is that they say, as a signatory of the Minsk agreement, Russia has a clear and direct responsibility to work and find a peaceful settlement of the conflict. This is in line with these principles, but it's one thing to look at this particular statement and the call for Russia to try and find some kind of peaceful resolution, but it really looks like this agreement has now flown out the window.
Well, certainly with this announcement from Russia that we had just a few days ago about recognizing these regions, that was seen as Russia sort of tearing up these Minsk Accords, and those were those agreements which a few years ago were designed to guarantee a ceasefire in that very in that territory in eastern Ukraine. That ceasefire has been violated on numerous occasions, but this seems to be really a step further, and the European Union certainly views this move by Russia as a blatant violation of international law. That's something, of course, that Russia would refute. We had an interesting message from Russia this morning. It said it was still open for dialogue, and of course the EU and NATO, these two big institutions here in Brussels, say they too are open for dialogue, yet we see both sides cancelling meetings. We've seen meeting cancelled between the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, at another meeting between the French foreign minister Jean-Yves Le Drian and his Russian counterpart cancelled. So while we see both of these sides saying they are willing to sit down at the table and find a diplomatic solution, and of course let's remember that is South Africa's position, it's pushing for a diplomatic solution around the table, it seems so far no talks yet are in sight in order to try and secure that. So while diplomacy is being talked about, we don't see it really coming into action here yet, at least.
It's going to be interesting to see if Moscow responds to this move by the EU. Thank you so much. Let's leave it there for now. That's Rosie Butchert coming to us live from Brussels.